Hello, internet. Okay, a lot of things going on today. Hopefully this works. Welcome to the stream. If you don't know me, my name's James. I'm a product designer, hobby musician, and I like designing music-related stuff. In these streams, I've been working on a project which is currently being called the Live Drum Machine. And I've mostly been doing CAD design here. Sorry, I just saw you can see me clicking away. Yeah, I've mostly been doing CAD design, and I'm doing that in SolidWorks, which you can see here. Wait. Yeah, I think that works. Yeah, SolidWorks stuff. So this is the live drum machine. It's a hardware digital drum machine, running everything on software. Today I've got a bit of a special episode because two of the other guys in the project are going to join me here. Their names are Jesse and Jan, and I have a really janky setup here that I hope works. I'm going to try to bring them in. So let's see if it works. Hello? I think you guys are muted, or have I muted you? Oh no.
I muted myself. Hey there.
Okay, so I think I might need to turn the volume up a little bit. Elk, would be greatly appreciated if you can let us know how the volume levels are, because it's really hard for me to check this. But yeah, do you guys maybe want to introduce yourself and we can see if the audio is working?
Sure. I'm just making sure I'm also able to reach the chat here. But anyway, what's up, everyone? I'm Jesse. Used to work together with James while we were still at Mod Audio, and founder of this drum machine project, so to say. Very grateful to have all these great people around helping out and working on this project together.
Nice.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? I'm Jan. I also used to work at Mod Audio together with James and Jesse. I'm a hardware and DSP designer. That's what Jesse asked me to do on this project. I'm very curious to see where it leads us.
Okay, Jan, also good. Good to hear. Sorry, I was just checking the volumes. Cool. Okay, so yeah, I guess we have a little bit of a plan. Okay, Yes is in the chat too, which is good. Oh, sorry, I've just frozen the Discord somehow. There we go. Yeah, we got a little bit of a plan today. Basically, I guess we can talk a little bit about the philosophy behind what the idea is, and we also have a design document which we can run through, and we're going to try to make some decisions based on what kind of components and things we want to have in here. So yeah, but yeah, who's in the chat? We just got Elk at the moment. Those are vibes. Nice to have you here. Bless. And yeah, so you could hear me clicking away in the background. Yeah, that 3 minutes in the intro, I'm like furiously clicking things, like trying to get tags everywhere and make sure everything's working. Maybe I need to mute the clicks in the future. Glad to see this project in motion. Yeah, we definitely are too. So let me see if I can get another view happening here. I accidentally hid you guys. You should be able to see them there. Did you share stream info across Discord? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I posted in a few channels, so hopefully some people catch it. And yeah, hopefully you guys can still see Yes and Jan okay. Maybe I'll crop this a little bit. Yeah, so this is the CAD so far, and we talked a little bit today, Yes and I, that we have some big decisions to make about how everything needs to be laid out. And it's quite hard to make those decisions now, I guess, because we haven't really had a chance to test anything out or to play around with anything. So this, I guess, will keep existing as something which is closer towards the final sort of prototype. But I guess we will also, in parallel to this, do some more lo-fi prototypes. So yeah, we're thinking today like we can laser cut a piece of acrylic, put some buttons in there and some knobs, and slap a Raspberry Pi on the back and get some kind of display, and yeah, start trying out some different layouts and see what works. So I think I'll steer away a little bit from the CAD today, and we can focus on, where is it? This, which is a design document, and hopefully it's big enough that you can read. Maybe I need to zoom in. Yeah, maybe I'll zoom in a little bit like that, and oh, I don't know how to fix this margin. This should work, I guess. How does that look? Oh, can you see everything? Can you read? And what do you guys think about the plan? I don't want to be talking the whole time. I think we need to get into a discussion. But where do you guys want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I can start a bit talking about the design document, because I made the initial setup some days ago. So generally, like, we have a purpose for this document, right? And the main purpose here is to describe all of the choices we have to make during the process, and describe our argumentation why we made certain choices, just so that in the future we won't have to revisit those points. And also we have some clear criteria on which we can compare them, and yeah, come to some data-driven solution instead of just deciding based on feeling. So there's a bunch of different sections in which we want to make some decisions. I added an example area at the top, kind of a work in progress. You can ignore it from now. But there's also an area for the component selection, an area for the device I/O, an area for the device HMI. I'm sure there will be many more areas in the future. And each of these areas, they have certain sub-elements that we for sure need to at least think about and decide. Just taking an example, in the device HMI, we see displays. All right, so when it's about displays, what do we need to decide? We need to decide about a main display and about alternative displays. Should it have a main one? Should it have alternative ones? How many, etc. So lots of things that we should decide on, and a lot of these changes affect each other. So having this centralized in a document, I think, will help us get some structure, and especially on the component selection, just set some standards for us to work with. I think this will also really help, so we don't need to wonder, what was the connector pitch? No, we just picked a standard. Easy. Yeah, that's mostly it, like the purpose for the document. And I think we can start going through it. Just having a look from top to bottom, see if there's any elements we want to add. This is very much a rolling document that we need to keep visiting. And whenever you have some time, feel free to spend some time on it,
Perfect. Okay. I guess since it's fresh on the mind, maybe we can start talking about the display. I'm wondering if I can bring up the display that we were looking at today. But I have to get the link from Discord, which... Oh, what is happening? I don't know what happened to my screen then. Yeah, so I need to get the link from Discord, but then to do that, I'm gonna, like... You guys' faces are gonna disappear.
I can also quickly take care of this if you want. I'll just post it in the document.
Ah, perfect. Yeah, that works.
You mean the one from Kiwi or the one from By
Yeah.
Display?
Yeah, I think the Kiwi one's good. Yeah, so we've been having this discussion about, and I might just flip back to the CAD every now and then just to give a visual demonstration. But yeah, currently, like this design has a 7-inch 16:9 aspect ratio display, which is, it's something we thought would be a cool idea just because they're super common and super available. They're really commonly used on tablets and stuff, and we don't want to go for something too exotic. But Jesse mentioned somewhere in this design document that it might be nice to have one knob per track, and the plan is to have 8 drum tracks, right? I'm guessing.
Yes, this is the plan right now.
So you can see here that these aren't very big knobs, and having 6 of them together with some area on the display to label what the knobs are doing, they're already quite close together. So we started thinking like, okay, if we want to have 1 per track, then we need 8. That means we need to make a fairly large display, or potentially try a different display aspect ratio, like something a lot wider, because this should be a hardware device. It's not meant to look like you're playing music on a laptop or something, so we don't want to have a huge screen in the middle of it. So okay, to open this in the right browser. So we're looking at something like this, which is a 7.9 inch 400 by 1280 aspect ratio display. And this one, I mean, we would probably use one from a different supplier in the end, but this is just really convenient because it plugs directly into a Raspberry Pi. So this can allow us to do like a really quick and dirty prototype where we can get one of these, attach it to a piece of plastic, and attach some wires to it. We can start hooking up buttons and knobs and things. So yeah,
I'm quite a big fan myself of this wider display. I think there's multiple things to consider. I think especially with regards to alignment, because having a wider display would allow us potentially to have a better alignment of the pads and the knobs and multifunctional buttons that are all on a display. We could have this all cleanly, nicely aligned, kind of Ableton push style, which I think a lot can be said for that. On top of that, we would be able to show a bigger amount of steps on a kind of piano roll type sequencer, because I think this is an interesting thing maybe to share. Is that we are intending to actually make a drum machine without step sequencer buttons, which is uncommon. Most drum machines have step sequencer buttons, but we feel that they force the player too much into a specific grid, a specific time signature. Either that or polymeters, stuff like that. It gets very nightmarish to program something in 5/4 or something in 7/8. You need to do a lot of math, and it's not something that's fun to do in the moment in the middle of a jam. So with that in mind, we were thinking about other solutions, and I have a lot of faith in the piano roll sequencer. I think it can be very nice, where the main interaction is to kind of play it like a looper, where you press record, play your pattern, press record, and then you make some small edits afterwards, rather than step by step inputting the sequence. I don't feel this is very fun or musical in many cases.
so I'm just frantically searching pictures just to give some visual demonstration. So when Jesse says we don't want to have any sequencer buttons, this is the kind of thing that we're talking about, like having a row of buttons that can be used to program in a sequence, which is generally 4/4. So we want to have a bit more freedom than only using 4/4, but also being able to do, like you said, polymeters, and also just different rhythms like 3/4 or 5/8 or whatever else. And you mentioned that Ableton Push, having knobs and buttons aligned. This is the kind of thing we're talking about. So having them vertically aligned like this with 8 knobs and 8 buttons, and the display is vertically segmented so that there's a clear, this label clearly relates to this button, and this value clearly relates to this knob. So that visual layout is quite nice to work with. And then
Exactly. Has a lot of benefits, I feel, to have this just aligned without you needing to do this mental math of like, okay, on the display it's the third knob from the left, so now I go to my knob cluster that's somewhere else and I need to count which one. Of course, after a while you'll get some muscle memory with it, but it doesn't feel very friendly to me.
yeah, exactly. And like we've been saying from the beginning, we want to do everything we can to make this device as natural to play as possible. So it shouldn't have a high cognitive load. It should be that you can easily get into a flow state and just play it as if you're playing an instrument, rather than really concentrating and thinking about it like you're operating a machine. One more thing, you mentioned a piano roll. This is just to give a visual representation of what we're talking about by a piano roll. And yeah, having that on a longer display could mean we could display more notes or more time on the display.
Exactly.
Something we have talked about before. Sorry?
I see Elk asked the question as well,
Oh.
if it was still P-locks. So you're talking about Electron style P-locks, right? Like hold down a step sequencer button and change the value of a parameter at that step. I think there will be ways to achieve this, but I'm not sure if it would have the same interaction yet. I think right now I'm leaning more towards like recording automation instead of doing specific P-locks at specific places, because I feel doing these P-locks, although it's very powerful on a programming side, I feel like it goes a bit against the device as an instrument workflow. It becomes more of a programmer's device in that sense. And I think the things you would want to achieve with the P-locks, you could also do by recording a piece of automation. And I think this could be perhaps more fun, feels more intuitive, requires less thinking, basically. So this is where I'm leaning now. But there will definitely be some way of automating something, at the very least, the pitch.
Yeah, so something else we've talked about a little bit in regards to the piano roll is how that should be oriented. And I don't know, I still find it an interesting topic to think about, like, because yeah, we could have a piano roll going left to right the same way you have here, but we're not going to have notes on a keyboard like this. We're going to have beats, or like I guess we will have notes, but there'll just be 8 notes, and each of them will represent a different type of drum. And those channels, or those different individual drums, will have a corresponding button. So it could also make sense for us to have a vertical piano roll, I guess you could call it.
I guess kind of like a Guitar Hero style
Yeah.
experience, right? With the notes coming down towards the trigger point. I do think the one thing to consider there is that although we probably wouldn't have notes in the main overview of the sequence, because you want to be able to see the triggers on all the channels, on all the tracks at the same time, I think there should be a zoom level where you could see the pitches that are being played for each of the instruments. Because I feel like having kind of a mode to play with in a scale using the 8 pads, which pretty much always covers an octave of a scale, unless you're going microtonal, like it opens up a nice world where I don't know, you get a hang drum type drum synth and you play a little hang drum pattern there.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some value to that.
Yeah.
So we do have to consider that, like, does that still work? Like, can we still represent pitch in a fun and easy to edit way when going top to bottom, or does this work just for triggers?
Mm-hmm. I'm just reading this message from Elk. Sounds great. To be honest about the workflow, I have an Octa. If I wasn't sorry, I lost.
I think he means like, in case he wants the traditional type of sequencing, he already has the Octa, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right,
you're
right.
right. There's already a million devices that do this traditional type of sequencing, and we're trying to build something that's a bit more performance oriented in the sense of live playing it, less having the patterns pre-programmed. Although, of course, that would be a way of using it.
Can the piano roll be recorded into from an external device? Yeah, so we want to have a MIDI input, right?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, right now, most of the prototyping happens in pure data, actually plug data. And little shout out to plug data for being very cool, by the way. They really made pure data so much more usable with the editor. It's beautiful. But yeah, for sure, everything right now works with internal MIDI commands. So I would like to keep that for the future as well, so that the whole device could be controlled from MIDI.
Yeah. So yeah, that's another thing to figure out, I guess. So, I mean, in my opinion, like, I think it would be nice to align the buttons and the knobs with the tracks. So I'd almost be tempted, if we were going to do a horizontal piano roll like this, that it might be even worth considering having a display even in a different orientation, like a vertical orientation or something. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think that there'll be like a mental disconnect if we have like buttons and knobs related to the tracks, but then we have tracks going horizontally for a piano roll? Like, this relates to this relates to this.
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned about it.
Yeah.
This is also why I think the like going vertical Guitar Hero style would be beautiful in a way.
Yeah.
Because it would align perfectly with the buttons and be kind of like, oh, I'm turning this off, and from that point on, anything that enters here in this gate no longer triggers. I think visually it could look beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think it's also unique too. Like, could be, you know, a feature that draws you to the device.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple devices that do this vertical thing. I think like most of all trackers are kind of famous for doing that.
But it's the opposite direction, right? It's like you're seeing the notes from the top and then traveling down, whereas like Guitar Hero style is like the notes are coming down to the bottom.
Exactly.
What are the plans for the audio engine?
So lots.
Will I be able to sound design directly?
Okay. Well, we have some thoughts on that. I would say initially we want to have samples. Like, there will be support for samples because samples are what keeps a drum machine alive 40 years into its existence. So I would say samples are a given. So there will be a sample engine. Other than that, we are open to contributions. And I think, Jan, maybe you already have some ideas of some things you would like to experiment with?
Yeah, so we went a bit into the same style as Mod Audio does it, but then our own independent backend. So we developed something new for that. but one can think of it the same as blocks that can be interchanged. So the first one will of course be the sample engine, but if you want to change one of those 8, be an actual kick drum generator which has 8 parameters, for instance, go for it. I think that's the goal in the end, to allow contributions in audio engines while having a solid base to choose from in the beginning.
Exactly. I think there's many things that we would like to prototype in that regard, and depending on how far we can go, lots of doors open. But I think first of all we're focusing mainly on having like a rock solid sampling engine, because I think that's the core one that will stay relevant pretty much forever. So that should be very solid. I think that's the main thing. But I definitely am interested in exploring more synthesis-based techniques as well. Like if you look at the Nord Drum 3P, I think that's can be a great inspiration for how good synthesized drums can sound and how dynamically playable they can be. I think this can be a very nice angle as well. With regards to being able to sound design directly, from my point of view, there should not be a computer editor for this product. I believe this product should be completely standalone. I do, however, think that there should be different levels of doing sound design on the device. So a way for people to quickly perform some changes that they want to perform, like, let me make the sound a bit longer, a bit shorter, a bit brighter, a bit darker. Easy, quick tweaks, kind of as a macro layer on top. And then if you want to, you should be able to dive into that engine and actually dive into the full sound design parameters. But I think this is likely more of a kit building process that for live use, you would use some sounds you already created. This is how I'm seeing this now, but to be honest, we cannot really be sure yet, because I think we need to start trying out before we can really answer that. Like how deeply we can do sound design immediately, and how much menu diving would be needed to go deeper.
Yeah, I think we would probably aim to be able to use your own samples, right? Like user uploadable samples. Maybe we can expose a file folder location or something where you could drop your own files.
Yeah, this is a must.
Yeah.
I think what he's asking as well is like if it could make sounds that he could sample, like the other way around, like to sample the drum machine and some unique sounds that it could make.
There are some things we thought about with that, right? Like from the machine learning perspective. Kais isn't really here to talk about it much now, but we were talking about having like potentially like a matrix of different samples and have some kind of intelligent blending between them, or I don't know, some interpolating between them, and that could create new sounds, I guess. So could be a possible way to do sound design that's based on samples.
Yeah, I would also say I think some of the samples that should be included should be single cycle waveforms, so that with a sample engine you can pretty much have a synth. This is how I use the Octatrack regularly. So just have a file that is one cycle of the waveform, set that on loop mode, play it, and then the envelope just determines how long that sound decays over. Boom, there's a synth. So I think this will already be possible immediately because you can load your own samples. And I think that should take care of like some initial synth needs. Further engines, I'd say, are very, very dependent on if we manage to create something that sounds cool, that sounds worthwhile.
I'll just quickly cycle back to some comments we missed. Maybe orientation can be manually assigned. Polyend Tracker has the ability to swap orientation of the screen. I prefer the tracker style sequencing over piano roll, but that's me in particular. That's a good point. We could have it so you could switch views. Like it could be the Guitar Hero view, or if you want to see over a longer timeline or something, we could switch to that kind of view. It's just something we would need to test out, I guess.
True. Yeah, we also have to see like how does it feel to maybe use both, because I feel like representing pitch in the Guitar Hero way may be difficult. Although if we are thinking about it like they're all coming down, normally you have 8 horizontal zones where triggers can happen, and they are the sounds. If you only have access to 8 different levels of pitch, you could still represent the pitch also horizontally of a single track.
Yeah.
Where a higher pitch is to the right, a lower pitch is to the left, which could also be kind of intuitive, to be honest. So, some stuff to try out there.
I'd love to make my own drum sounds. I think we covered that. I'm holding out on a drum machine purchase and would like to be able to have something that offers me a bit of flexibility. Well, I think that we will definitely try to offer that, but I wouldn't say hold out on purchasing a drum machine because I don't know how long this is going to take.
It's a big project.
Yeah, for a small group of people.
A while.
Yeah. What else have we got? As long as there's a synth engine so I can design my own kicks and percussion. Yeah, I mean, not planned yet, but perhaps in the future, I guess. Any plans?
I'm here to rush you.
Hey?
The last message. I'm here to rush you.
Yeah.
Thank you for putting the pressure up.
Any plans for onboard effects? Yeah, I was going to bring this up in terms of sound design as well, because this will come into what essentially will allow you to do some kind of sound design, having onboard effects, and that is planned, right? And you guys have already worked on some effect.
Yes.
Pretty much, yeah.
I said some effect.
Yeah, so last time I was actually in Berlin with Jesse, we worked on this. Mostly about the idea of, well, actually, Jesse was the one coming up with this. The idea that most time-based effects are actually the same thing, just with a different range on some knobs and some extra modulation on other knobs. So we decided to make the Super Delay Deluxe Supreme, which can go from delay to chorus. We're thinking reverb as well, but just to cover the whole shebang, basically.
Yeah, it could do a whole lot of stuff. Chorus flanging, delay, reverb with multiple delay lines getting crossfed into each other. What else? There was another comb filtering type stuff. Something we could do. We already have kind of an early version of this that already works kind of well-ish for a first very dirty version. It requires some cleanup and some more sound design. That's for sure.
Yeah, actually, probably once the weather gets bad, I might finish the VST implementation of this, so we can actually continue that a bit better.
This can be cool. We could also maybe share it around a bit and get some people to use it on a computer and see what they think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess.
In case you're interested, Elk, we could probably gladly share that with you when we get to a point that it can be installed.
I was gonna say, I guess he would probably be keen to try it out because he's been doing a lot of VST stuff lately.
Cool.
But yeah, so I guess we would basically summarize that as like the all-in-one time-based effect, like Swiss Army knife of everything time-based, right?
Exactly. Yeah, the big reason is like we want to have it all work with like based on muscle memory, and I feel like these things where you can switch out an effect for a different kind of effect in which the parameter settings change, like you have on the Octatrack, it doesn't work so well for muscle memory. Like every different effect you use, you need to relearn the memory for that effect. And I feel like if we can make this transmorphing effect, which the proof of concept already exists, and I believe that we can get this to sound good, like very nice. This will be great because you never need to think which effect am I on. You just turn the knob that does what you want. You want it longer, you want it shorter, you want it brighter or darker. You don't need to think so much about what is going on right now. allows you to work purely from muscle memory. So this was the main idea there, and this would be on a per track basis, right? Having this the SDDS, the Super Delayable Look Supreme, working title, and then there would be a master bus, of course.
I'm 100% interested, and yeah, I am on VST a lot right now. I have a bad habit of buying Swedish workflow items.
I have a feeling I know which brand you mean. And I think Jan and me also have a nice habit of using those.
A Swedish habit.
A little Swedish habit.
A bit of Stockholm syndrome, or maybe Gothenburg syndrome.
Little bit.
There's something else I wanted to touch on there, but I can't remember what it was. Don't know what I was thinking. Maybe since we're sort of in this mode now of like just talking about what kind of things we've been doing and what the plans are and stuff, maybe we can share more about the software, or about like the operating system or something. I'm not sure if that's interesting or if that's something you want to go into. Or...
Yeah, I think we have the main diagram, yes, that might be interesting, which kind of shows the main signal path, right?
You mean what is it? It's the canvas thing, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, other than that, I can show a whole bunch of code, but I don't think we want to get into that.
Yeah, this may be a bit hard to process, right? Interesting question from Elk there, actually, by the way, just quickly going there. Will this be able to multi-track over USB or have independent outs? So this is something that we're deciding on, and actually getting some input on that would be very nice. Personally, I think we need at least a stereo balanced main out, because we want to make this for performances. Great. We should consider having individual outs if that adds significant value. But I would say for a performance situation, it's probably ideal not to have to bring a bunch of effects pedals and plug them up externally. It's probably nicer to have this clean and smooth as a setup. So I was thinking that with the Push 3 now having ADAT I/O, and that being received quite well, that we should consider that either ins or outs. I don't know. I think it's more interesting to have an ADAT out, especially because if you want to multi-track and you already have an interface, I think at the price point that kind of the rough range of price that we're targeting this drum machine for, we can expect people to pretty much have an audio interface with ADAT. And seems like a lot of people are not using those ADAT ports. Also a reason I think why Ableton went with that, like for adding that ADAT I/O on there.
Yeah, I mean,
quite interested in that.
Digital transport is something that I have kind of been obsessing over for the last few years, and yeah, there's not so many great options. Like basically you have SPDIF or AES3, which is the same thing on longer cables, and an XLR connector, but you're limited to 2 channels. ADAT is pretty perfect for us because it's 8 channels as far as I recall.
That's exactly it.
I think you can change it if you want to change the bitrate or something. Maybe you can do a higher bitrate over 4 channels, or can't exactly remember. Other than those, you really need to start looking at either USB or audio over IP. And I think that brings its own challenges because you need an audio over IP chip. You need a PHY, I think it's called, like a physical layer chip kind of thing. And I'm not sure what complication that brings in, but also not many people have a setup that is ready to accept audio over IP on Ethernet. But yeah, like you said, most people do have an interface. At least most people who are willing to buy a product like this would have an interface, or are willing to buy an interface with SPDIF in or ADAT in. So I think that the ADAT is a pretty practical option.
I think so. Especially looking back at some experience from Mod Audio. They both have audio over IP as well as audio over USB, but both are still dubbed experimental for a reason.
Yeah.
It's hard to get it right.
But the audio over IP is also over USB, right?
Yeah. Ethernet over USB. Then
Yeah, we're using NetJack, right? It's I mean, it works and it's cool. It's just in a practical sense, I have faith that ADAT would be significantly more useful in a real world use case, outside of the lab. I think the same is kind of true with audio over USB. Like audio over USB in general, it's hard to implement well, and you need to deal with licensing costs because you need to certify your interface because you're making an audio interface, or you need to provide some external software that allows your computer to even understand it at all. And then you want to mix that with your regular audio interface at the same time, and everything starts falling apart. So I think ADAT could be a lean way to integrate and have multi-track outputs for the studio, but for live use, just have easy main out. Having said that, I still think we should consider having individual outs, because it's not a topic we thought about a lot yet.
Yeah, could be an option. We might start to run out of space on the back for jacks, but if we wanted to do something like that could work with like a modular setup, then maybe we could even consider doing 3.5 mil jacks or something. Not sure.
I would love a setup, I think, where you just have the main out and then assignable out. Just in the case where you want to have your kick separately to sidechain it with somebody else. Just like one or two extra, but two preferably then. But I think that covers most.
Probably like one stereo assignable out pair or two mono individual outs, or I don't know. Like I also think if we would have individual outs, something like that to me makes more sense.
Yeah,
because it's rare that you want to use all the individual outs. This is very rare in my experience.
We just have to keep an eye on feature creep. Like, because we could say if there was two analog main outs and then ADAT out, if somebody really wanted to, they could break out ADAT with an ADAT to analog converter or something.
Yeah, I think this is a solid option as well. Like to just say, okay, we don't have extra ins and outs, but we have an ADAT in and out, so that you can expand whatever you would like.
Yeah, because we can't provide everything. We have to find a balance, I guess, of like including as much as we want to include that makes the device really nice to use, but not going overboard, not making it too complicated for ourselves to finish the project or too expensive for somebody to buy it. There's a few questions there. What is the sample rate? 48K? I think ADAT can do 96 on 8 channels.
I think ADAT can only do 48K at 8 channels, no?
I can't remember. That might be true.
Yeah. Either way, I think 48K in general is probably the target sample rate.
Yeah, for an output, I think it's probably fine. Yeah.
I think if we go higher, we won't be able to manage an affordable CPU for 8 channels in our product.
Exactly.
Something to consider.
True.
Yeah, I would only use like oversampling in some very specific parts to get the benefit of the 96K sampling rate, so to say.
Yeah. We
could maybe have like some oversampling in some saturation algorithm somewhere or something like that, so that we only run at higher sample rates where needed.
You mentioned a target MSRP. What is the projected pricing goal? I don't know. Do we want to talk about that? We could just say like at this point we're not expecting it to be cheap. Like for such a small project, like our margins are going to be pretty bad. And we also don't want to cut corners and make it super cheap. Like we want to make a device that is right for everybody, or does all the things that we think it should do without skimping. But I think we should try to keep the costs low if we can. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I would say I think for me the goal is to not waste money, but to also not save money on parts where the more expensive part is significantly better for the experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easier to make something like this first and then eventually do an iteration of the product that's cheaper. I think that's more interesting right now, I think, because we're trying to make something that's quite different from the conventional drum machines. I think saving on a couple of components is not going to help a lot. How do you say it? Because we don't yet know exactly what a drum machine like this should be like. You know, like running a more fancy one with fancier parts will allow us to answer a bunch of questions, like which features that we thought of are good, which features are actually not fun at all to use, which features are the unexpected heroes of the device. And I feel once we have answers to those questions, we could strip down and go for a more cheaper version later. This is how I feel about that.
Better make a good product and in the end save money on selling in bulk.
Yeah,
exactly.
My Roland multi-tracks over USB has a single stereo out. It has a terrible USB ground loop noise. Would ADAT eliminate that?
Yeah, it would actually eliminate that.
Yeah,
because it's optical. It's beautiful.
yeah. USB is complicated, I would say. Like, probably the most complicated way we could do it. Potentially, but could be the cheapest way if we have a good implementation. Yes, the side chaining is where my interest is at. I'd be happy with an extra assignable output at a minimum. Yeah, I think that'll probably be possible in some capacity at least. But ADAT would be perfect for my personal setup. Yeah, I think ADAT would cover a lot of bases. ADAT is unique. Will this device take a barrel connector for power to avoid USB ground loop? Jan, maybe you can talk about that, but I think we can already avoid USB ground loops, right? With USB power.
I'm not sure what power connector we eventually get into. I think that's a bit separate, but I think one of the hard factors is for this device that we want to pass all electrical certifications when we need them without having a grounded plug. It will make the electrical design be a lot trickier, take longer, but I think in the end it's worth it.
In fact, I even think we should still consider whether it should have a barrel plug or just an IEC connector. Like if you think about like a professional keyboard that people take on stage, for example, you often don't have an external DC break with you. You just plug in a power cord. So I think there's something to be said for that approach as well from a user perspective. Although I know from a certification point of view, this is not great.
Yeah. It also adds cost to the device because we need to include the power supply and in the device and extra weight and those kinds of things and space requirements. So I don't know. I'm hopeful that we can do USB.
Yeah, I would love if we could power over USB. This would be beautiful.
Yeah.
Like,
and then we for sure are gonna need like, you have laptop chargers which have USB-C, right? But it's one of those power chargers, so you're gonna need to provide a power charger. In that case, it's not general USB.
Depends.
We can just. I actually like can speak from working in the speaker industry. um, when it comes to like portable speakers and things like that, the regulations are set, like actually specifically state that you need to sell an option that doesn't include a power supply, by law. I mean, this wouldn't apply to a drum machine. It's not included in the regulations. But you can still make a speaker which requires like I don't know, a 65 watt charger or a 100 watt charger or something, and still you actually have to sell it without the charger. And I think we're getting to a point where people understand like, we don't need to talk about volts and voltage and amperage, but we can say, yeah, you need a charger with 25 watts or 35 watts or whatever. I think it would be acceptable for us to say that and just tell users, yeah, you need a power supply with this much power.
Yeah, this is one
point
approach.
where we can, then let's go for it. But we need at least 20 watts, maybe even 25.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm really not sure how much do you think a backlight of a display like this would consume, because I imagine the big difference in like power consumption between, let's say, a Duo X and a drum machine like this would be in the display, no?
I can quickly calculate that for you because I think we can share. It's not that exciting. So backlight of a Duo X is half a watt. So that's 1 watt for the two displays. And what it uses on average is 11, 12 watts.
I think mine uses significantly less. If I look at it with a power meter, I think my Duo X routinely uses like sub 10 watt power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to jump forward to the chat. Elk said, I record primarily at 48K for video stuff. So I think 48K is adequate for most cases. What? No, I guess that's in response to the pricing. Are we looking below Octatrack pricing?
It's hard to tell.
I guess probably not, right?
It's hard to tell, but I think in all likelihood, given that we don't have any kind of economy of scale, I think it's highly unlikely that we would be able to sell it for less than an Octatrack, to be honest.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll see in the end, like how much the component pricing is and everything. But yeah, being that it's 3 or 4 guys, without much funding behind us, like, bigger companies can survive off like a 300% markup. We're probably looking at more like 500 to 600 at least, for us to even just break even. So yeah, for us to compete with bigger companies, it might be a stretch, but we'll see. Like maybe the BOM cost is not that high as we expect, but yeah.
Yeah, in the end, it depends. Like, what are the outcomes of some experiments we want to do? For all we know, we find out that actually the rest of the parts is not that expensive, and the device doesn't have to cost so much.
Yeah, and I'm not planning.
That a smaller display, a cheaper display, is fine instead of spending like 30-40 euros purchase price on a display.
Yeah, I'm not planning anything too exotic with the enclosure. I think it'll be pretty straightforward. The CPU and the display will probably be the most expensive parts. PCB assembly will be close after that. Switches aren't cheap, depending which switches we go for, but yeah, it all adds up. But I don't know, it might not be that much higher BOM costs than something like a Duo X. It might be double, I don't know.
If I have to guess, it's gonna be closer to double than to one Duo X in BOM cost. But we're gonna have to see. It's too early to do proper calculations on that. But I think our priority right now is not to go for a cost down. Our priority is to design a very cool product that is amazing to use.
You consider it.
Based on what we learn,
you can consider it boutique, but I think Elk would probably figure something out for you because maybe we can sort out some kind of testing plan or something. Okay, you know me, I'm a whale. Show me something to spend money on and I'll gamble. Good to know.
appreciate it.
That works as well. I have 2 synths that are USB-C power only, and it's fine when using audio over USB. I have to isolate the power supplies and when I am using the analog outs. Yeah, let's see. Hopefully we can make that not a problem. I feel I'm gonna buy it because I want to support you guys. So roughly 1,500 is what you plan for? Maybe.
No way to say right now, man. It's a bit tough. We need to do a lot more napkin math before we can get to that concrete of a figure.
Let's say likely something between 1,000 and 3,000.
Yeah, this accurately, we could probably make a statement.
Hurry?
But then again, we may need a bunch of CPU power and figure out we need to slap an incredibly powerful CPU in there. All depends what we prioritize.
Yeah. Somewhere between 2 to 3 mortgage payments. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I think of it like a boutique product.
Exactly. I would say, by the way, about the power situation still, like I see that Elk brought this up, like needing to isolate the power supplies when using the analog outs. This is something that can happen indeed. I will say I have this base station 2 from Novation over here, and it has a toggle switch, which switches between DC power on one side, off in the middle, and USB power on the other side. And I guess that's why they support both cases, like both powering with USB as well as with DC, so that you can connect it separately if you don't want to have this ground loop potential. However, I've never had issues with ground loops with that particular device, even when powered over USB, and I pretty much exclusively powered it over USB. So I would say there are examples of devices that are powerable over USB without this downside. There's also many examples of the opposite, though. So let's prioritize the audio fidelity there, of course. But I think from a practical use case, I would love to be able to just bring a normal USB power bank, a wire, take that device anywhere and play.
Yeah,
I think that's a great use case, and I would love for that to be able. If not, though, we can use an external power bank with a DC out. It's also not a big deal.
Yeah, that is a big thing. I think in terms of convenience, being able to use just like a power delivery power bank that doesn't have a DC jack, because the ones with DC jacks, you can find them, but they're not as common. But like if it's powered over USB, you could use any like Anchor power brick or something, which would be pretty nice.
Exactly. If somehow we can stay within 10 watts, this should be doable. But this is the question.
Very sorry, man. Actually, I just stood up to measure my DOX because I was just curious, and it got to 9.6 during boot at its peak. So I'm very skeptical, man. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, no, I get you. With a big display, this is gonna get unlikely, I guess. So.
I don't think like I'm talking about power delivery power banks, and you can buy power delivery power banks now that can deliver 100 watts.
true like USB-C PD
Yeah.
instead of just regular USB.
Exactly. Yeah.
I would say still, if it in any way is possible, having normal USB, 5 volts to what is it, 2.3 amps or something like that, that would be beautiful. But I mean, I completely get it that this is probably an unrealistic dream. USB PD would be a nice close second, though.
Yeah. Yeah, that is another point. Like, if it did have audio over USB and you wanted to just plug it into your computer with a USB-C cable, you would need another USB-C cable to power it, unless your computer can supply 25 watts, which is probably not likely.
That's a fair point.
So we probably would need at least 2 USB jacks.
You see that on laptops a lot nowadays. They have 2 USB-C ports.
Yeah.
One for like docking stations and one to charge.
Yeah.
Yeah, or both for both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thunderbolt ports. Thunderbolt 4, I think, is USB-C. So
yeah, the difference between where Thunderbolt or where USB stops and Thunderbolt starts, it's not very clear. Like, they did a pretty good job messing that up from a communication point of view. But there is a USB-C standard, which is basically equivalent to Thunderbolt, if I remember correctly.
I think so. But I think even the Thunderbolt 4 spec works over a USB-C connector.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also
I don't think we need Thunderbolt. I think this is the situation.
Yeah.
I think Thunderbolt is only required if you need like PCI Express level of data throughput.
Yeah.
And even if we were to hypothetically support audio over USB on like 8 channels, you're not talking about gigabytes of throughput. This works on USB 2.0. You can support these data rates. So Thunderbolt is, I would say, from my side, I think I don't see a reason to include it, except for maybe transferring samples faster to the machine. I'm not sure if that warrants it.
USB 3 is probably fine. I missed before. Elk said he's a ramen eating champion, so he'll make it work, referring to the price. That would offer a lot of flexibility for a wide range of setups. I know enough to make it work regardless of the hookups. I'm guessing that's about USB-C. My setup is a Thunderbolt
between DC and USB.
Yeah. My setup is a Thunderbolt 4 and I have an expander arriving tomorrow. But could Thunderbolt provide enough juice? I think Thunderbolt isn't necessarily like a power spec. Like if you just look at I mean, power delivery is really the spec to think about. It's part of the USB spec. So power delivery, I think, currently supports up to 100 watts, and it's planned to support up to 240 watts.
Yeah, I do see an interesting thing here, though. It says that a Thunderbolt 3 cable charges devices at a standard 15 watts of power. But any devices with PD protocol are charged at up to 100 watts. I mean, this is just some takeaway from HP here. But to me, that sounds like Thunderbolt 3 actually has a 3 amp standard current then, like 5 volt 3 amp or something like that. Jan, do you think that could actually work, juice-wise? Because I think the Pi actually uses a 5 volt 3 amp power supply, right?
True. Yeah, that's without a display. I'm not sure. The thing is also what you gotta take into account with especially switch mode power supplies. So if it's gonna be external, the closer you get to the limit of the power supply, the noisier it's gonna be. So it's nice to have some overhead there. Which is one of the things we did at Mod, actually.
Fair.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the DC barrel is our most likely hope at this point, right?
I'm a really big fan, but I'll settle for anything that does 20 watts.
I would still go for USB-C. Like,
We can do a quick investigation to see how difficult it is to support that. And to see, like, we can try with a couple of USB-C power supplies that we have around here. Maybe we can measure them for noise or something.
true, yeah.
Jan, we could probably set that up in your lab, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Yeah, I think with all the USB-C power supplies we have together, we should be able to get a pretty decent image, like a decent picture of like, hey, how bad does that get if we were to use some USB PD circuitry?
Something related to noise and USB-C charging is inputs. We still haven't decided really yet on audio inputs, whether we have something like sampling inputs or trigger inputs. If I show the document again, how do I do that? Yeah. So, okay, Addy's, yes, is just adding some notes about the power. Audio inputs. Consider having audio inputs can be useful for running external audio through LDM effects. Master bus, used a lot on electron analog rhythm, can also be used as trigger inputs for piezo drum pads, for example. So, yeah, something we're definitely considering. Audio inputs could potentially be used for sampling, I guess, at some point. But having them also configurable as trigger inputs for drum pads or drum triggers could be really cool too. So connecting some drum pad to it, or connecting drum triggers from an actual drum kit, I think could be really cool. Like, I imagine if somebody was playing an actual real drum kit with skins and stuff, and they have drum triggers inside the snare or kick drum or both, or in a few other different drums, while they're playing the normal drum kit, that playing could also be triggering things on the drum machine. So it could try some different creative things there, where like you could have a sequence which is progressing as you actually hit drums, so it's like automatically synchronizing to your rhythm because it is playing at the same time that you are playing. So that could be cool too.
Exactly. Yeah, this is actually a thing that we've been focusing on prototyping quite a bit, is freezing the time and playing the time instead of the notes. I was hoping to be able to show something here, but unfortunately I don't think I can pull that off setup wise right now. There's a logical problem in the setup, a logistical problem. But I think this could work super well together with a feature like that, having like some trigger inputs you can put on a drum, and having those trigger inputs be used to either set tap tempo and advance the sequence, or just advance the sequence at a certain subdivision. Like every time you play a kick, your sequence also progresses by a quarter note or something like that. I think there can be some very interesting things in this domain. Besides our initial intended use case for this freeze and play, which is more of a joining a jam where people are already playing at a certain time, like allowing you to easily join into a jam with a drum machine.
I'm just thinking, you sent some videos of that to us, right?
Yes.
I might even be able to pull them up.
You can give that a try. Yeah.
Shit, I don't have Telegram installed on my computer. Maybe I can work on that in the background while we talk about something else.
Sure.
Elk just asked any CV IO.
Yeah, so I had some thoughts on that. I think CV outs, I think having clock and maybe your clock reset out could be useful. just so that other devices can sync to the drum machine, especially if we have these modes like freezing time and playing it. It could be quite useful to have some way to also sync other CV devices with that. So from that side, I think having those outs makes sense, and maybe have a configurable amount of pulses per quarter note for the clock out, stuff like that. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to have like pitch and gate outs, stuff like that. I think it would require us to have a massive amount of outputs before it gets practical. So perhaps something that could be done with an ADAT out. There's this company from Berlin that makes a DC coupled ADAT expander for the outputs. They're also heavily pushing towards use with the push. So there are ways to do this, like to add CV outs with an ADAT expander, if that is something we want to support eventually. Right now, I wouldn't say that's a priority though. I think on the input side, I think CV ins, I think are like, there could be a clock in as well, potentially. But I think there would be more use for kind of switch inputs, like something where you can put a foot switch to go to the next pattern or the previous pattern if you don't want to use your hands for that, or some feature that you could assign to an external input. This is something that I think we should consider, but also not something that's final as a decision. I also think like triggering a kick drum, stuff like that, having one of those kick drum pedals, stuff like that could be useful.
What would you feel about having DC coupled inputs? So let's say we have two inputs, whether it's audio, CV, it doesn't matter, there's two.
Could be. I'm not sure if that makes it easier for us on the implementation by a lot. I think in general, I would try to reduce the amount of configuration where possible, so that, like for example, if we could have separate outputs for different features, I would prefer to have separate outputs than one output and a menu that you need to press 12 buttons to access, if you get me. So I think I would prefer not to do too much of this commuting. Commuting, right, between different output styles.
I think I just have one video here that you sent me personally, Jesse.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. Did you send us another one in Discord, or maybe just show us in a call or something?
Let me check. I can see on my phone. Let me see. Yeah, I sent one to you personally. Didn't I send one in the Telegram group chat as well? At one point?
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think in the Telegram group chat you can find something. It's an older version though. Obviously.
Was it before that video that I sent? Yeah, I think that might be the same one. Is it the same one? I think it's the same one because the time code is like 3 seconds after. Wait, no, it's different. Anyway, let's check. I'll play them and we'll see.
Let's see if it works.
Elk said menu diving is against your design philosophy on this unit.
Yeah, totally. I would say more than that though. I think on the mod products, having these inputs that can switch between expression or CV, it was a good solution for the product. But I think in this case, I would not like ports to be very multifunctional, or at least not multifunctional in a software level. I would like to be able that if a port is switchable between expression and 2CVs, that there's like a physical toggle next to that port, so that when you plug that in, you set that up, and that's how your device is set up, and you are not in this unexpected state where you need to enter a menu to see if it's working as intended, or if it's set up as intended. If you get what I mean, I think it
Oh no, all good. I
would be
was
easier.
not talking about a menu per se. I'm just thinking about the amount of interfaces eventually going to the actual CPU, because it's another thing it needs to keep track of and keep pulling.
Yeah, I get you.
If we could have that be the same thing, just maybe even with a hardware switch indeed, like CV or audio.
Exactly. I
Be
think
really
something like that could be, but I think we don't know yet if the CV inputs would provide worthwhile functionality. It's something we still need to see. And also things that we could use the CV inputs for, some of those things that would also be already enabled by an audio input, like having piezo drum triggers. Whether you have a CV or an audio input, doesn't matter, pretty much. You can still get a quality reading from those sensors. So we need to get a bit further in the process before we know if there is a benefit to having them, I would say.
I've got a video up here. I will see if I can play it or see if the audio works. Let's see. I think the audio is really low. Yeah. I don't know if you could hear that okay. Yeah, so maybe you can explain what was going on there.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's audible on the other side because I have the stream muted because we have the real-time audio here.
I think, Elk, maybe you can tell us if you can hear that, the beat or not. I think I could see it spiking on the mixer, but not very loud. God, this is annoying when VLC does that.
All right, cool. I can hear it. So basically what's going on there is this is an earlier version of the prototype in which tap tempo is not yet implemented. So with this prototype, we just have different buttons on the MIDI keyboard that are mapped to a button inside plug data. And each button progresses the sequence with a certain length. So there's a quarter note button, an eighth note button, 16th note button, etc. On the version that I have here right now, it also updates the tap tempo at the same time. So if you want to speed up a tempo or you want to slow down, you can just gradually start tapping slower, start tapping faster, and every downbeat is exactly in sync with that part in the beat. So if you have a 4/4 beat, you press a quarter note button, it's snapping to quarter notes immediately. So this allows you to really quickly speed up, slow down, and play with the band, basically, when they are doing speed ups and slowdowns.
I have the other
What's
video.
up, people?
I think this is a newer one.
Quick
I think so,
demo,
yeah. I think this one has
because
tap
I
tempo
got
in
to
there
a
as
state
well.
where it's interesting. Let me reset the sequence, and let's try.
So I guess that first beat, the first button you were pressing was doing like a single beat, and then this second one is doing 2 beats, right?
I believe I couldn't hear it very well. So and I believe that in this state of the proto, the leftmost button, the C, it does a quarter note tap, and then the one on the right of that, the D, it does an eighth note tap. So it is also doing the calculation as if you were pressing eighth note buttons. So if you play at the same rate as the quarter note, then you're gonna have a half of the BPM, basically.
So basically, when you're watching, you can see when the key lights up, that's when Yes is pressing the key, and it's progressing the sequence. So I'll just play it and you can see what's happening. And then that last key just continued the pattern at that given tempo, right?
Yes. Yeah. You can basically see this as like a super stupidly over-engineered tap tempo that may end up in the product.
So it does
We're
quite
trying out
something.
to see if this is useful in any way. So I'm currently working on cleaning up the prototype. It's a lot cleaner already. I cannot show you the audio, but I can open the project and show you what it looks like now.
I think it's getting closer.
This
Soon I'll be able to
can be
share a
something.
proto. Looking forward, guys.
But yeah, I'm working on cleaning that up, and then I'm gonna do a debrief to the project team soon, so that everybody can try out the proto and start taking some insights from it to understand. Okay, so for my personal case, I had fun using the quarter note and the eighth note button, but the 16th was kind of useless. And all the triplet ones feel nice, but the dotted ones don't make sense, for example. Yeah, just trying to take as many learnings from this as possible to see in what capacity they should be in the device. I think personally, I really believe in the eighth note button. I think it's great. It feels very intuitive to me to use that. So maybe in the end, it shouldn't be a whole collection of different buttons, but it should just be there's a tap and a tap B, so that you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that. Need to think about what kind of UX can be nice with this. But having two buttons would allow us to do other things as well, like set the time division by doing a count-in, where you tap A, B, 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 play. Okay, cool. Now you're in a 4/4 thing. If you would do A, B, 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 play, now you're in a 5/4. So you could think of interesting concepts with this. I'm not sure how natural it's going to feel though. So experimentation. Either way, what is a good way for me to share my screen here? Should I share it into the Discord or?
Yeah, I think that's a good option.
Let's see. Let's see if this works.
It might shuffle things around a little bit.
Let's see.
Maybe you could turn off your camera while it's sharing, because I think that the camera is frozen now.
Right.
But I also don't see the screen.
No?
Do you see it, Jan?
Because I see it.
No, for me it's still loading. Oh, it's there.
Is it visible?
I have to do this. Okay, I think this works. Yeah, I think that's visible now.
Awesome. So yeah, that patch that you saw before now looks like this, which is a hell of a lot cleaner. So we have the blue area kind of, which is the UI for controlling the prototype, and in the bottom left, we have our little blocks. So a clock block, a little sequencer block, something for the drum kits, a little mixer, little output volume down there. And also if I control, for example, the volume from this interface, the blue area, you will also see it moving down there at the bottom.
I kind of like that
Yeah.
keyboard, lol.
Yeah, so from here, we can see the current BPM status, whether the clock is running, the sequencer progress, and a little layout at the bottom here so that you can connect any kind of MIDI keyboard, and the labeling below and above the keys show what each of the buttons does. So this way we can do a bunch of lo-fi prototypes without any of us needing to get any hardware protos yet. It's just plug in a MIDI controller and try out the proto. I don't think you're going to be able to hear any of this though.
It's working, but we can also hear it on your mic.
All right, cool. Well, that's kind of practical in this case, I guess. Yeah, doing cam and mic at the same time is not really an option, but either way, it's looking a lot better. It's not quite there yet to be shared, but this proto will be passed around the team soon. Okay.
So you're actually pressing the key on the controller, I guess, right?
Yeah, I'm pressing the key on the controller on my desk. For our next stream, I'll try to get a better setup here to be able to demonstrate it better with the camera at the same time.
Cool.
Yeah, of course, like we can dive into each of the blocks and the submodules and all that stuff, but I don't think it's too relevant for the stream to do that now. A lot of small things in there.
Yeah. Got some messages here from Elk. I like that I spend 95% of my time experimenting, so experimental features is something I'm interested in. I kind of like the keyboard. My drum VSTs are keyboard based in the UI, so the keyboard actually makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, I guess a lot of people program drums on keyboards as well.
Exactly. It's an acceptable alternative while we don't have a hardware proto yet of the drum machine.
Sick, I have plenty of controllers at hand. Yeah, I mean, I guess this piano roll could also, this piano key set could also be represented as pads, but it's just makes more sense laying it out like this, right? Like, because then you have the note names and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier to see also because the octaves are numbered. I'm not sure if you already saw this, but there's the 3 and the 4 written on the keyboard to make sure that, okay, it's this exact MIDI note.
Yeah.
So, but you can also change the mapping. It's quite easy actually. If you go into the file, there's an easy way to map the different features to different things.
Elk says
actually, in fact,
this stream.
There's the note.
Sorry. This stream has answered a lot of questions about the device itself. The details should come later on the other streams. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I will close this little thing because there's not much more to show for now, and turn on the camera again.
Jan, I don't know if you intentionally muted yourself or not.
Yeah, just when I'm tapping around.
Okay, cool.
I'm really good at sitting still, so.
And we're back.
We have just been dying to get you on the stream for some more details. Yeah, every time I'm working on CAD, Alex pestering me with like, is it gonna do this? Is it gonna do this? I'm like, I gotta get Yessa to answer these questions.
Yeah, like on that note, I've been thinking about making this machine for a while. Like already while working at Mod, this idea frequently in my head, and I've spent a lot of time ideating over this. So it's actually very nice that we managed to all come together and work together on that as a project. So it's very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm keen to be working on a cool hardware device. Yeah. Getting excited to get my hands dirty and start building things.
Oh yes. I'm already on the prototype live, but can't wait till we get to have some mechanical things we can feel. You know,
Yeah.
I think it will be also very nice to, I don't know, just to have something that we can hold. You know, it will be a nice milestone.
So, if I cycle back to sorry, just read this one message. Yeah, I'm very excited to watch as it progresses. Me too. Me too.
We all.
Yeah. If we cycle back to this question about displays, something Jan you mentioned today, I think you were maybe concerned about because we were talking about these two options of different aspect ratios displays, and yes, I mentioned that you'd like to test the differences between them, and you were asking like, okay, to what capacity are we gonna test them? Because I guess if we're gonna test them at some point means that you need to make an app which can fit both of those resolutions.
Well, actually, the one that Jano actually sent, the one from Kiwi Electronics, that's just a HDMI display.
Right.
So if we can also stick for that for the other form factor, and just get two HDMI ones, so we don't need to bother with any extra hardware for now. Software we can scale, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And once we actually settled on a display, then we can look at getting an integrated one and stuff like that.
Do you think there's any risk in going for the HDMI display? Because I was thinking about this as well. Like for the prototype, I don't personally care so much if it's using MIPI DSi, as long as it doesn't make us think that, oh, this all works. This is a wonderful, wonderful product. Great, great. And then it's like, until we try to connect MIPI DSi, and then the plan falls apart because there are no SOMs that support, I don't know, what we already were using plus MIPI DSi in the resolution we need, or you know what I mean?
I don't think so, but honestly, worst case, internally we keep using HDMI and wire it up to our own SOM. Worst case, right?
Do the Raspberry Pi like compute modules and stuff, or like any kind of SOM, do they have direct HDMI outs? Isn't there any external circuitry needed for that?
A tiny bit, but in theory, a DOX could have an HDMI out on the inside.
Okay.
It doesn't add too much, to be fair.
All right. I mean, as long as we don't need to have an external HDMI cable plugged in, you know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah, for sure.
Would be ridiculous,
But that is something we talked about, and maybe this is getting a little bit out of the scope of the product, or of the focus, but we toyed with the idea of actually having a HDMI out on the device that could power some kind of beat-driven visuals of some kind.
True. That would be a dream if we could. I have a feeling though already that with the level of feature creep we're having,
Yeah.
maybe that is something for the second iteration, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Alex says, bro, I'd shit.
Maybe if we get it to work for the prototypes, we'll just leave the pads on the PCB, someplace we don't need.
Mm.
And whenever it's actually done, somebody can open it up and mess around with it. You know?
Yeah, why not?
True. Jan, are there any MIPI DSi displays that you could borrow for a while from your work maybe to do a test to see if using HDMI and MIPI DSI in parallel, if there is like some interaction, some limitations.
For this test, yes. But actually, at our work, we're having a lot of issues because we have a horizontal oriented display, or no, vertically. So we're actually having a lot of trouble getting it to landscape mode. But just turning it on, putting on some pixels should be fine.
All right. Yeah, I think that's our main concern, right, at this point.
For the prototype, it'd be fine to use HDMI though, right?
I'm just a bit concerned about your drawing, man. Because then the HDMI is on the outside of the Pi.
Which drawing?
The prototype drawing, the mechanical one.
Yeah. Oh,
So I
right.
think we need the Pi then, right?
Yeah, I think that this. Where the fuck is it?
Because like this one is on the outside, so otherwise you'll get a loopback, which
Yes.
is also not, doesn't really
So
matter.
I think that this prototype, well, I'm sort of questioning now, like, because what we were talking about today is making a more lo-fi prototype where instead of having a full metal enclosure and a big PCB, we just basically make a top plate with holes in it that we can mount some components into, and we just hand wire them, and like in a really sketchy way just hook them up to the Pi and get one of those displays like this where the Pi is on the bottom of the display, and basically just have that sitting here, and then the HDMI port would be on the inside.
Alright.
Well, the HDMI port would actually be directly plugged into the Pi. I think it has like a little PCB here that connects it.
Pi has 2 HDMI outs, by the way.
Yeah, so looks like one of them is occupied here by the display. So this would be like a lo-fi prototype, something that we can build reasonably quick. Like we could start building this now, without having to order like any custom-made parts.
Exactly.
So I think that could be nice. And then I don't know, it might even be that by the time we actually build this thing, with the metal enclosure and stuff, maybe we're already at the point where it doesn't make sense to have the Raspberry Pi in there. Not sure. Because we can like this Raspberry Pi is intended for figuring things out, like for getting something working before we decide what's finally going to be the brains of the device. But maybe we can figure that out with a more lo-fi prototype, and then I already just start building this design with like something more that we're aiming for having at the end, like a compute module or something.
Because one of the hard limits of the Pi that many people try to do, there's a few companies that succeeded, but I wouldn't go and do more than stereo audio on the Pi, for example.
Yeah.
You know, so if we want to get to 4 outputs, I would already consider a different sum.
Yeah, I feel you. It's, of course, for the prototype, it's a different question. We can just use the class-compliant audio interface with Linux support and yay. But I think in the end, for the final device, we will for sure, if we need more than stereo out,
yeah, then the Pi is
actually more than stereo out plus mono in, because I believe it can do that. But yeah, then we're already at a point where it would make sense to go for another song. However, do you know how ADAT gets implemented, Jan?
Yeah. I think it's similar to SPDIF in that sense, right?
Yeah, so you don't need I2S, I squared S lines, right?
SPDIF is I2S.
Ah, really, as well.
Yeah, in the cases of most codecs, yes, there's other ways to do it, but
So for ADAT, you also need that amount of data lines that the Pi doesn't provide, basically.
yeah, but if you go look at the RK3588, you can do 32 channels of audio if you want to.
Yeah.
It's just a Pi limitation, to be fair.
Yeah.
Cool.
So like, I mean, this design, I would feel a little bit like, oh no, like I spent all this time figuring out this thing, but at the same time, I'm like, I mean, this is pretty ugly. So I'd be happy to get rid of it and start working on something that's more of a final design if we're just going to use this in more of a in between stage.
Yeah, I would say I think it's highly unlikely that we end up with a regular Raspberry Pi 4B
in the final
product.
for sure. Yeah, I was kind of thinking like this design would be the one where we put a bunch of extra holes for switches and we can move the switches around and have like a kind of modular grid for this main PCB. But yeah, maybe it's too much work even already going for a full custom PCB just for a prototype that is very far still from the final design. So yeah, maybe I take this Pi out of here and start figuring out more like of a final design here while in parallel working on like a really dumbed down version of it where we just basically have a top plate that we can hand wire everything to.
I think this can work. I think you could also, of course, like kind of mark out a piece of the PCB of like, okay, this is kind of roughly the space we would need for a CPU. This is roughly the place where it would live.
Yeah.
This would probably already allow you to move on with most of the CAD design, right? Even though we don't have a final CPU chosen.
Yeah, and we have a lot more freedom in like where we can put the CPU because or the SOM because it's not going to have IO on it, so it doesn't need to be like in a place where the IO is accessible. Like what I mean is like it doesn't need to be in this corner so that we can get to all these ports.
Exactly. I mean, we could even say that for the first prototypes, especially if we just have the laser cut sheet where we can just house our HMI components, then everything will be wired, including HDMI and power to the proto, right?
Yeah.
So that should be doable.
And like most of the SOMs that we would consider are considerably smaller than the Pi, so it'll take up a lot less space in this.
Yeah, I would say so. Although I think the cooling solution might need to be a bit bigger than the one that would be acceptable for the Pi for some CPUs.
I'm planning to just directly connect this to the top plate anyway, which I think will be more than enough.
Just like block of metal.
Yeah. Yeah, or like a like an L bracket sort of thing, a C bracket.
Got you.
So it's not just like a solid piece of metal, but just like a thing that, yeah, basically a C-shaped thing that bolts up into the enclosure and down into the PCB.
Gotcha.
It would be really difficult to make the bottom the heatsink. I'm just thinking back, right, because we did a similar thing to the DOX where we made the enclosure cool it. And I just remember there were a couple of people asking, like, my DOX is heating up. Is this normal?
Mm.
I feel like if the front plate would heat up, people might be even more afraid, you know?
Yeah, so um, it is possible. The thing is, yeah, I mean, we can investigate it, but the thing is, we need to decide if we want to do a double-sided PCB or not, because if we do put it on the bottom, then we need to have components on the bottom of the PCB. At the same time, I like the idea of attaching it to the top, because then when you take the bottom off, you don't have to like ruin the thermal paste connection, and you don't have to redo the thermal paste each time you take the bottom off.
True.
Yeah.
I will also say that if needed, I am not necessarily against having some ventilation slots,
Yeah.
depending on where they are located.
Yeah.
Not a problem.
And the other thing is, the jacks will come through the holes in the back of the device. So, if the SOM is attached to this PCB, which is attached to the top plate, and you bring it down into the enclosure and then have to slide it across to push the jacks out of the holes, then you'll be kind of like pushing it down on the thermal compound and then like smearing the compound across.
Yeah, that's a bit shitty.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know how hot it'll get. Like, there might be a warm patch on the top, but on the top is maybe not so bad. Like, I don't know if anybody would ever use the device on their lap, but I think having a warm patch on the top then is nicer than having it on your lap on the bottom. But yeah, maybe that's not really something to think about, because yeah, I don't know how many people use it on their lap.
Ergonomy-wise, most drum machines are really painful to play on your lap.
Yeah,
I don't think it's necessarily a use case we should account too
yeah.
much for.
There's a couple of messages there that we missed from Elk. Gonna need that orange screen. I want that Fallout New Vegas Pip-Boy screen. Okay, that's a vibe. Actually, my first ever computer was a Micro B, which was it had a, what do you call it? Like one of those what are those old CRT displays that only showed like characters, like ASCII or whatever, and like it would make images out of the characters, and it was all orange on black. It's pretty dope.
There's actually some pretty cool pure data projects with Gen that do a lot with ASCII animations.
Yeah, nice.
Quite dope. I wouldn't mind fucking around with that a bit as an aesthetic for a kind of visualizer if we go down that route.
Yeah, that would be cool. Do you need any monies to secure parts? To be honest, I'm surprised, given your knowledge of our track record by association. I'm surprised you would be open to giving us any money in advance, but no, I don't think we would want to like take any loans or anything or investment. I think it's, well, yeah, not at this stage.
Yeah,
anyway.
not at that stage yet. No. I'd say potentially for a second revision down the line, we could consider such a thing. But I think especially for this more beastly version that's not aimed at being necessarily mass produced, I think it would be better if we do this on our own force as much as possible.
Yeah.
And only when we know we have a concept that's gold.
He said, "Yeah, but I'm here to rush you. Just pay." I mean,
start ordering some system on chips, sending them to Jan's house.
To really rush us, you would need to pay all of our salaries. So I don't think we can ask that much. No, but I think like even if at some point, if we were going to do like a Kickstarter or something, obviously we have to be very aware of like, um, I don't know if people would associate us still with mod or anything, but I think none of us had any control over anything that happened there. But I think from our experience, like even if we were going to do a Kickstarter or something, we would wait until we were at the stage where we had like manufacturers locked in, ready to push the button, where it's like, okay, once the funds arrive, devices get made, and they get made then, and they get shipped. So it's like, it's not funding any of the process, you know, it's just funding the manufacturing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's nice though, like what Elk just wrote, like that they have the special button that you have to select. Like this is not a pre-order. This is
Yeah.
good. But I I feel that even though people have to press that button, not everybody feels that way when they press that button.
Hmm.
You know, it's I wouldn't like to create any kind of expectations at this point with regards to timeline, with regards to speed of delivery, with
Yeah.
regards to what gets delivered at all at this point. You know, it's all too much in the open, and it's too much of a research in a research state at the moment to do that.
Just got to put a copper plate on the front and install a big Noctua MHD15 fan on the face. It's like a big tower cooler from Noctua.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic cooler, right?
Yeah.
I think I used to have one in my desktop back in
I've
the
got
day.
one in my desktop now. I love it.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah.
Silent.
Yeah. No, but I don't think. I mean, hopefully we don't need any active cooling. Like, hopefully we don't need any fans or anything like that. Even if they were tiny ones. Yeah. Hopefully it's all passive. We'll see.
Yeah, that should be 100% the goal. Fans and music equipment are very frustrating.
Yeah. I think that was a disconnect with the mod stuff. The button is relatively new to pledging. Yeah. Yeah, if only that was there back then. Yeah. Oh well.
We get the luxury to learn from other mistakes, so let's just not make our own, right?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think we learned a lot of things not to do. We're almost getting to 2 hours now. I don't know how you guys are feeling. If you still got some topics you want to talk about, or if Elk still has more questions, or if we should start thinking about wrapping it up, or how are you
I think
feeling?
wrapping it up wise, I would say if we can conclude on the display from Kiwi, I think I would order one in the next weeks to arrive in Berlin, so we can do some experiments with that one.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And then also find a little HDMI, like 7-inch, like 16:9 kind of screen. Jan, do you think it would make sense to try to make one of the resolutions match? For example, if the Kiwi one is, what is it, 1280 by 480? Should we get an 800 by 480 or a 1280 by 720 kind of display, or don't think it matters?
No, let's just go with 2 mock-up applications for now, see what feels right. Decide after.
Yeah, I feel similar. I think at this size also, like, we would already have a lot more resolution to deal with than what we are used to from mods products, so to say, because we are suddenly having high resolution color displays. So even the relatively low resolution ones, I think would be good enough to test what we want. Low resolution being 800 by 480.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can start getting some. I can buy some sheets of acrylic, and I guess in my next stream, maybe I'll take a diversion from this model and work on like this really lo-fi model and base it off the dimensions of whichever displays we choose. And yeah, basically I'll just chuck the display in the middle and put a bunch of holes as options for where we can put knobs and where we can put buttons and stuff. Maybe
Nice.
I can even make something like a grid where it's like a series of like 6mm circular holes as well as like 14mm square holes in like a grid, so you can basically place encoders or switches wherever you want. If you know what I mean.
Honestly, if you can have a nice pattern for that, I think that would be great. Because I think for these lo-fi prototypes, I don't think we should try to make a full drum machine. I think this is very much about making a custom setup to run user tests on a very particular feature. So, for example, one thing I would like to run tests on is just system transport. Like, is it playing? Is it stopped? Is it frozen? Like the prototype we showed before. Should the stop button reset the sequencer to the start, or should it work as a pause? Should it only reset when double pressing stop? All these kind of considerations, like when you press start while the sequence is already running, does it restart? Like all these kind of little interactions, they don't require the whole drum machine to be there. They just require you to have like maybe a couple of preset patterns available and the buttons needed to control that. So I think testing some things in isolation can be good for us at this point, so that we can start getting some answers on some individual questions and have less open questions, so that we can start ticking off some boxes.
Nice.
So moving them around, great, especially for ergonomy reasons.
Yeah.
That's where I was going.
Yeah. Well, if you need some help with seed money on prototype parts, I'd be willing to kick in a bit to help you out. I think that's really awesome that you would offer that. It's super cool, but
Thank you, man.
yeah, but I think we would not do that. Yeah, super nice offer, but I think probably all of us feel like we want to just not take on any guilt or or responsibility, or we don't want to feel like we owe you something. I don't know, maybe that sounds bad, but I think you already do so much. Like the fact that you're always in the streams and you're interested in the project and willing to try testing things out and stuff, it's already like, so I think I can say for all of us that we're so grateful for what you've already done. So yeah, I think giving any money would be too much.
Yeah, it's really appreciated though. It's thank you a lot for offering. I would say I feel a bit similar to James in this regard. Like taking money at this stage, even if it's just to help finance the prototypes, it doesn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
It's especially because we're at a stage where the amount of money we need to spend to run the prototypes is not so high yet.
Yeah. And we could fuck it up.
We
you
are
know?
yeah. It's also very unknown if there will be an output, right? Like we're trying to design this machine, but we're not able to commit all of our full-time lives to it.
Yeah.
So this is something that's very much running on passion and personal interest. Taking any kind of money feels a bit wrong in this construction, I would say.
We've seen projects from people who are dedicating 1 day a week to them for years, not ever end up going anywhere. So there's a good chance that it could happen to us as well. Hopefully it doesn't, but yeah.
Have to stay realistic about that option as well. So it's, for now we're doing it on our own force, but if we ever get to a point where this could help us out, we'll surely remember you.
Yeah, and I think if you want, like, if we get to a point where we have a design for a device that we've made and we're testing it out, and you want to get one and test it out, probably we can just figure out how much the parts will cost, and you can pay for the parts and we'll give it to you. Something like that. I don't know.
Exactly. Would actually be nice to think about it in the future to build up kind of a little network of people trying out the device from very different perspectives. So just you being here now and providing that input from your perspective, this is the most valuable to me personally at this point, and I think also the most valuable to the project.
Yeah. Connections with PCB manufacturers who do custom work, also connected in robotics industry. Yeah, I think that could be helpful down the line for sure.
Yeah, I think if we get to areas where we look into, I don't know, James and me have been talking about this, like looking into finding a creative sensor in a way for the device, like something iconic in the sense of the crossfader on the Octatrack. You know what I mean? Or a lot of legendary devices have this, like a lot of Roland synths have this pitch bend modulation wheel combination thing, like or the Roland D-beam. Whether you like it or not, it's definitely memorable. So we've been thinking about this on a should we consider some interesting sensors, some stuff that's not so standard to see if it has interesting musical applications. Joysticks definitely are on the list of things we're considering. I also think joysticks are awesome, and they come in many different shapes and sizes as well. So there's some cool stuff to try out. Perhaps the robotics connections could be useful in this part, especially.
Trackpad knob. the nipple.
The
I
mouse
was gonna say the exact same thing, man. I just couldn't.
Yeah, instead of a touchscreen, we just have a little nipple in the middle.
Oh, yeah.
Just a few of them spread around the device, you know?
This is how you draw your automation curves, with a little nipple. I do love ThinkPads though. Never use the nub. Are there some other topics that we want to still figure out today? Like we already talked a bit about the display. I think this was the main reason for the three of us to meet as well.
Wait a second. Why is the Discord keep closing when I do that?
Anything on your side, maybe, Jan, that you've been running into?
No, I think some point soon, yes, so we should talk about the software integration mostly. Like getting the plug data to work with the audio and stuff like that.
Yeah, and also I think especially looking into to what extent we can use the plug data sub patches in the on the actual OS, like running on ARM and everything. I'm not sure about compatibility of all of the libraries. I use a couple of libraries from Cyclone, the ones that basically add max MSP features to Pure Data. And I don't think that those are supported by HVCC, the compiler, that can turn these Pure Data patches into actual C code. So I'm not sure which parts can be directly translated. If there should, I don't know. We need to talk about this. How to
Exactly.
set up this whole architecture.
Especially if we start hooking up the screen, we need some front end for the application as well.
Yeah,
Let's get there. I think that's quite valuable at this point.
true.
Also, of course, because we can still ask Giano to do a lot of things as well for us. He's willing to be to help out. He just doesn't know what to do, basically.
Gotcha. And Jarno was also more interested in like the OS setup, system architecture side of things, right? Or would he also be interested in working a bit on the DSP, actually?
Also on the DSP.
Nice.
He's down. He just doesn't have a concrete task, so he's kind of stuck on that mostly.
Because I think I don't know about like what his experience is with like processing drums in general. If he did a lot of that in the DAW or like in studio work before. But the master bus is definitely a little beast that needs tackling, and that will definitely go through some iterations before we end up with the thing. So I think if you would, if he would be interested, we could ask him to look into that. Like,
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of things I would, yeah, but I think having a little software chat would be nice.
cool. Yeah, maybe we can do this next week. I'm gonna go to Poland on Friday until Monday. Little trip.
Where are you
Yeah.
going?
I'm going to Świnoujście.
Okay, good. I'm going to Krakow tomorrow.
Ah, really? Oh, fun. I mean, we live so close, right? It's easy. No, I'm gonna go with Annie, with my girlfriend. We're gonna take the regional train.
Oh, nice.
It's we found a Deutschland ticket trip there, so
Cool.
we managed to get a free train.
I have an
Nice.
important question though. Are you guys in Berlin starting the 24th again?
Of July.
Yes.
I should be, yes. Are you coming?
Yes.
Nice.
So we can even have an in-person little chat.
Nice.
Yeah, let's do it.
But
Would you want to meet the week before as well? Like meet on the 18th? Or let's just go in real life?
All good for me.
I'm just gonna suggest let's talk about this a little bit after the stream. I think we can talk more about meetups and stuff.
Fair.
I just wanted to touch on the front end. You mentioned like we need to figure out something on the front end. Also like we need to test something between these two different displays, right? So we'll probably need to start mocking up some UI sketches for both these aspect ratios.
Yeah, I would say we can quickly make a little note of that. I can do it at the bottom of this document, maybe.
Actually, that's one of the reasons why I really vouch for setting up Qt, even though we cannot commercially sell that in the end. Now for quick prototyping, Jarno knows how to set that up really well. It even runs on a computer and it's all JavaScript based. So I think yes, you also know your way around that, right? To implement UI elements like that.
Ah, yeah, that should be super doable.
I think it would really give us a quick start in development, even though we should already be aware that in the end we should get rid of it.
Yeah, let's talk about it to see if there's easy ways to migrate from it, or understand how much the license actually is. Because if we're talking about a very small licensing cost, it can be worth it.
You pay them per device, so we can even calculate it into the cost of a device. It's not the end of the world, so to say.
Okay, you're not talking about like 100 euros per device type thing.
I don't think so, but I'm also not sure about scale there. I would need to check.
Right.
Well, otherwise, we'll buy them off my work because we accidentally bought almost 1,000 too many.
Do we know if ADAT has any licenses?
I believe ADAT is free to use, no?
I'm not sure. I would have thought as well, but you never know.
Let's see. ADAT license. Advanced Dental Admission Test. That's a different kind of ADAT.
Elk says, blows my mind how easy it is to travel. It's over an 8-hour drive to the next state, lol. Oh, I know what you mean. Like it's the same. It's the same thing in Australia, but yeah, it's a lot closer here.
Yeah, it's if you have a car, I think from Berlin you can drive to Poland in like sub 1 hour, right? It's like 45 minutes or something.
Yeah, but Poland is quite close to the border. I mean, Berlin is close to the border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I go back to where Jan and me are from the center of the country in 45 minutes, you can cover a rather big percentage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In either direction.
Yeah. And Prague is like 4 hours away.
Yeah, it's all rather close.
Yeah. But to get to Venice is a good like 12 or 13 hours.
Yeah, it can take a while if you go by car to the south. That's true. Anyway, I was making some notes in the document while we were speaking. Basically, we need to make some mock-ups, you're right, with different display aspect ratios. I think we can quickly define some main views that we would need to support. And I believe one is the piano roll sequencer. This is one of the big reasons that we want to consider the wide display. I think the other big reason to do it is for controlling parameters. I think those two mockups definitely need to be made, and we need to think about a mixer type thing about how that would look with both, because I feel that's an area where the widescreen would also help a lot.
Yeah. See, I think if we have a 7-inch 16:9 display, we're going to have to limit the number of knobs to 6. So we're going to have probably 2 fairly different UIs. One of them is going to have maybe 8 buttons along the bottom, and one of them and 6 knobs on the top, or we have like 6 knobs, 6 buttons versus 8 knobs, 8 buttons.
Yeah, exactly. I think it basically enforces a different paradigm for controlling tracks. Like if you have a knob per track, you could have a button that changes the function of all those knobs to something. Like you enter the mixer page and now everything is volume. And you enter the panning page and now everything is panning. You enter the EQ page and now everything is a tone, for example. Whereas if you have 6 knobs, I think it's more about selecting a track and then changing all of those things at the same time for that track. So I think it depends a bit. Having a knob per track allows for both. It allows you to go use all of those knobs for one track, and it allows you to have a dedicated knob per track. And I feel that that is very useful when it comes to simplifying the device. This is a feeling I have, but
Elk says, I wouldn't even be out of my state in 4 hours. Is the mixer offering EQ or just volume mix?
I mean, there should for sure be volume, and probably like some mutes or solos or something like that. But it depends, right? If we would have a knob per track, we could go for a more mixer approach where it is actually a volume, and then maybe when you hold shift it's pan, or there's a different pan one or different EQ one. If we go for this per track basis, then it's not really the mixer that offers the feature. It's more each track has a volume and a panning control, and there is no global mixer for that. So I think this is also a consideration. Like, should the device have a global mixer, like a place where you can easily see the overview of the levels of all your tracks, etc.
A button with 8 micro LEDs representing each lane, where all encoders represent the controls per lane. A button with 8 micro.
Yeah, like those. Do you know, like the Blofeld or the microcork? Like Waldorf Blofeld, the microcork, where you have like these encoders, and you just have like this lines of text with an LED to the left of it. On line 1, it controls the envelopes. Line 2, it's the oscillators. 3, it's the filter.
Wait, what am I searching again?
Microcork, I believe, has it. The Waldorf Blofeld has something like that.
What am I looking at here?
Yeah, I think if you look at the Blofeld, probably you're gonna have a better time.
Blofeld?
Yeah, like BLOFELD from Waldorf.
Got it. Which one is it? This little thing?
Yeah, the little thing.
Oh, that's an interesting enclosure. Doesn't have a back on it. Okay, so a button with 8 micro LEDs representing each lane, like this kind of thing?
Yeah, it's not exactly the same. I think what Elke is suggesting there is to have like one button instead of a button per section.
Yeah, yeah.
But basically have like this matrix of parameters where depending on which line is selected, you have different parameters on the encoders. I think there can be some use in having something like this, but I feel like ideally the display would take care of showing you everything that you see here in the silk screen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this could be a way that it could work in a mixer mode, so to say, where yeah, okay, on this lane you're controlling the volumes. Here's the mix. Here's this, or you could have, hey, here you're controlling the mixer relevant settings for track 1, and it's volume, panning, EQ.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something to be said for both, but I think in the end, I would like it to just be minimally distracting and minimally, you say, with a minimal mental load. So I think the solution that, when you look at it, it just makes sense. That's the solution that I think we should go for, instead of a solution that requires you to think a lot of like, oh, this button belongs to that thing on the screen, and I don't know. I have more faith in something that, how do you say that? You look at it, it's clear, everything is cleanly aligned. I don't know. I have a feeling that would be better for a device that you don't want to think a lot about.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Cycling back quickly to the mockups. Something else that we need to mock up in order to get a bit of a better idea here. Because I feel these are the main things. Either the knobs and buttons that, like the multifunctional ones, are going to be controlling parameters of some sort, or you're going to see the piano roll sequencer on there. And then a special case of controlling parameters could be this mixer, which could work in kind of this more matrix style approach. I think these are the things I'm mainly concerned with. We could also consider putting something like menu navigation on there, because I feel like with a wider display, we can do this nice thing with a menu with different levels, like kind of unfolding like a tree, which I think is very nice for navigation. Instead of diving to the previous and the next screen, you can actually see your previous screen, and the next screen populates as soon as you select. So I think there's a potential advantage there.
Yeah, if you had like 8 levels and you were like choosing something on the 8th level, even though we wouldn't go that deep, you could like press the first button, like the first track button, and it would go back to the first level.
Exactly, like you can have some nice interactions with that.
Yeah. That could be cool.
Plus, I think there is something to be said for borrowing some conclusions from other manufacturers that have spent a whole lot of money doing R&D and user tests, such as
No, I'm joking.
something that presses, let's call it that way. Number 3. Hell, what?
No, I agree. I was just joking, by the way.
So yeah, I think menu navigation is relevant. Mixer, piano roll sequencer, controlling parameters, alternative type of sequencers. We can make some mockups for that, because we had some cool ideas for alternative types of sequencers, like something that's based on limbs moving in directions instead of based on triggers on a track.
I didn't hear about that one.
Sorry?
I didn't hear about that one.
Really? I can quickly share something about this idea. It's very much an idea at this point, but I I was sitting down here with Lucas at one day, I believe, and we were talking about like why are drum machines, why do you get different results than when you have a real drummer? And like one of our main conclusions was that real drummers have physics to deal with, and so like okay, the hand needs to move from one thing to another thing in minus infinity amount of time, and that's not going to happen. So this is not possible. Therefore, that sounds inhumane when doing that on a drum machine in a way. And then we were thinking like, okay, what if you would make a sequencer based around the whole idea of having limbs that flop around in different directions and hit triggers on different tracks? So, like, I mean, very abstract concept that we would like to explore. Maybe I would do this together with Lucas because he's interested in having a project as well.
We need to just program in like a virtual guy. Like if
Exactly. Exactly, like some virtual avatar that has like limbs and maybe you even have a control. How many limbs does this alien have?
I was
2?
I was thinking
5?
more like, say you're gonna hit two drums, one after the other, that are two drums that you would hit with your right hand. Maybe it could be like, okay, because a right hand drum was just hit 1 millisecond ago, there's likely to be a slightly more delay onto the next beat because it's technically the same hand. So you could write like rules where like certain combinations of hits could affect the timing in a very specific way that like
Yeah, there's, but it's interesting, right? I think we can explore this a bit, like this kind of algorithmic sequencing. Like, okay, so indeed, like, oh, you triggered something with your right upper limb. This hit something. So if you want to hit something in that same area, that has a physical consequence. If you want to hit something across from it, that has another consequence. If you want to hit something that's below it, it has another consequence. I think by parameterizing those consequences, we can actually make some very interesting drums, or maybe have this as a humanize mode over a regular sequence. So let's say you program something that's completely inhumane, it's not playable at all by a real drummer, and now you turn on limb mode so that it limits what gets triggered. You know, so like you have something that's constantly playing with 8 limbs at the same time. Well, now limb mode is gonna humanize it by adding physics into the equation, so to say. I don't know, things to think about, but I think there are some views that we will need to create for this, very much custom ones, and perhaps one of the displays is a better fit for that. So, something.
Are we talking Travis Barker drummer or Ringo Starr? Oh, Def Leppard drummer mode. That would be cool, actually. I never thought I would see the words limb sequencer used together.
Yeah, it's. I just cannot think of a better name. It works, right?
Not sure if we'll have a Travis Barker mode or a Ringo Starr mode or a Def Leppard mode, but we are planning to have a Phil Collins, right?
Yeah, Phil Collins. Like we want to have different personalities where the drum machine can generate fills for you, kind of.
As in like this.
And then one of the Phil modes would be Phil Collins. I think this would be beautiful.
Yes, that would be cool. Actually, oh no, he wrote that before. Yeah.
Oh well. Jan, James, can you think of any other areas where a mock-up would help clear up some doubts?
Not right now.
I think if we are settled on these, we're pretty much there, right?
Yeah, I think we have the most important ones. I think we could, of course, add things like naming, but I think regardless, we're gonna find a way that works well enough with either one of them. And on this machine, I want to have arrow buttons. Like there will be arrow navigation buttons. So no matter what display we pick, we will be able to do a decent job.
Yeah, at least like left, right, enter, return, or like forward and back.
Yeah, some stuff like that. We'll be able to have a quick operation of inputting a name fast enough. If we don't use touchscreen, let's see.
Yo, Jean-Claude Bryce Lancriot. Thanks for the follow.
Thanks, Jean-Claude.
That is an epic name.
Oh yes. Very cool.
Elk said, when I started with all this audio stuff, I didn't consider that drummers can't play everything at once. Lol. The limb sequencing would actually be useful to new beat makers. Yeah, I mean, especially if you're... It's probably even nicer for people who are making not electronic music. Like, so that... I don't know if it's would actually prevent you from, like, writing beats that aren't playable. I don't know, but maybe that's not really what we're talking about, right? Like,
yeah, I think it potentially it could, but I think for me, where the interest lies on like a programming side for the limb sequencing is more, how can we parameterize this limb limitations, like these physical limitations that limbs impose? How can we parameterize that in like an interesting way that this becomes fun?
it's not just like random offbeat timings or random swing values and stuff.
Exactly. And at the same time, I think it could also be a form of interesting algorithmic sequencing where instead of where with a traditional sequencer, you're sequencing triggers or no triggers. With this case, you would not work like that at all. You would be sequencing like the direction, for example. Like, at this part, the arm goes up, and at this part it goes down, and at this part it goes left, and then it goes to the right. And maybe this can be something that's interesting, or maybe you need to set a mode for the hand. Like this hand always goes up and down, and you can set a modulator for it so that it modulates here and here. You know, like it swings. I'm not sure exactly how this should work, but
we could have like a
for sure will be a lot of protos for this.
We could have like a fatigue parameter where like
Yes.
the faster together the beats are, the more fatigued the player gets.
Activate octopus mode. Sorry?
You can have a level of drunkenness, you know, how many bass did my drummer have? How tired is he actually still?
Can be cool.
I'm thinking maybe we wrap up the stream now and we can stay on the call for a bit to talk about catching up and what we're going to do next and everything.
Sure.
Sure thing.
Works for me.
Anything else you were dying to mention to Elk or to any future watchers?
Quite fun to be here.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it didn't go so bad for the first time. I think technically I could make some improvements, but it was good.
Yeah, I think for next time I'll also work a bit more to have a bit of a more technically ready setup to show these demos.
Yeah.
Because with plug data, at least I can run inside the DAW, so I should be able to use that and make sure I can get some audio into the stream as well.
Nice. Okay, well, I'll do a typical YouTuber outro. Yeah, Elk, thanks so much for being here as usual. So it's great having you here and having somebody to interact with.
Yes.
Much appreciated. And yeah, anybody who's watching this after if you're watching the recording, thanks for clicking on the thumbnail and watching and checking it out. It's really appreciated. Yeah, we're just super excited that anybody's interested in the project and excited to keep working on it and keep showing you what we can come up with. So yeah, if you like the stream or the video, you know, give it a like or subscribe or whatever if you feel like it. You can follow my socials here. Do you guys want to plug socials or?
I don't have any socials to plug right now.
Okay.
Eventually, when we get the socials for the drum machine up, should start plugging those. But
Yeah, maybe at some point too we could make, we could, like we have our own Discord channel. We could maybe divide it into like an internal team and like an externally accessible area where we can invite people from. We can invite viewers to join if they want to give input and those kinds of things.
I think this could be very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can create a little channel for like with external guests, especially for prototypes. This could be very useful to have a place to share.
Awesome stream. Appreciate Yes and Jan for giving their time for more details. Hey, let's go. Yes, in my spirit animal. All right.
I'll take it. Thanks, man.
Okay. Let me figure out how to outro this shiz. Yeah, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time, I guess.
Give likes to James. Like this stuff.
Okay.
Share.
What am I doing?